The silence in my house felt different that Tuesday morning. Not the comfortable quiet of a man enjoying his coffee alone, but the hollow echo of being deliberately shut out. I stared at my phone screen, reading the same message for the 5th time. Message failed to deliver. My name is Eli Mercer, and I'm a 42-year-old contractor who's spent the last 15 years thinking I knew my wife. Turns out I was wrong about a lot of things. Jenna had left 3 days ago for what she called a much-needed girls' trip to Aruba. Her exact words were, "I need some space to reconnect with myself and the girls." The girls being her college sorority sisters who still acted like they were 22 despite pushing 40. I'd tried texting her yesterday, then again this morning. Both times, the same result. Message failed to deliver. When I tried calling, it went straight to voicemail. Not the kind that means the phone is off or out of service. The kind that means you've been blocked. Interesting, I muttered, setting my coffee mug down harder than necessary. The sound echoed through our kitchen, bouncing off the granite countertops Jenna had insisted we needed to keep up with the neighborhood standards. I'm not the jealous type, never have been. But I'm also not stupid. In my line of work, you learn to notice when things don't add up. When a foundation has cracks, when electrical work looks shoddy, when someone's story has holes big enough to drive a truck through. Being blocked by your own wife while she's on vacation? That's a hole you could drive a convoy through. I grabbed my phone and scrolled through my contacts until I found Brittany Haynes. Britt was Jenna's best friend since college, her partner in crime, and the one person who knew all of Jenna's secrets. If anyone could explain why I was suddenly persona non grata, it would be her. The phone rang 4 times before Britt answered, and I could immediately tell she'd been drinking. It was 11 in the morning. "Eli? Oh, hey, what's up?" Her voice had that overly careful tone drunk people use when they're trying to sound sober. "Hey, Britt, I'm trying to reach Jenna, but I think there's something wrong with her phone. My messages aren't going through." There was a pause, a long one. In the background, I could hear music and what sounded like a mimosa brunch in full swing. Oh no. Britt's voice dropped to a whisper. "Eli, I can't. I shouldn't be the one to..." The one to what? I kept my voice calm, but my grip on the phone tightened. "I'm so tired of covering for her," Britt said, and I could hear the alcohol loosening her tongue. "I told her this was a bad idea. I told her someone would find out eventually." My blood went cold. "Find out what, Britt?" "She's not with us, Eli. She's not in Aruba. God, I can't believe I'm telling you this. She's with some guy. They went to Miami together. I've been posting old photos on Instagram to make it look like she's here with us." The kitchen suddenly felt too small. I stood up, pacing to the window that looked out over our perfectly manicured lawn. Mrs. Dooley, our 70-year-old neighbor, was watering her flowers and pretending not to watch my house. She'd been doing that a lot lately. "What guy?" I asked. "His name is Trevor Lane. He's some tech entrepreneur with more money than sense. They met at that marketing conference in Boston last month. Eli, I'm so sorry. I never wanted to lie to you, but she begged me to help her and..." I hung up. For a long moment, I just stood there, staring out at the street where I'd lived for 8 years. The street where Jenna and I had talked about raising kids someday. The street where we'd hosted barbecues and Christmas parties and pretended to be the perfect suburban couple. My phone buzzed. A text from Britt. "Eli, please don't do anything crazy. Call me back." Then another buzz. This time it was a photo. I opened it and felt something cold settle in my chest. There was Jenna, my wife of 12 years, pressed up against some guy in an expensive suit at what looked like a high-end club. Her hand was on his chest, her head thrown back in laughter. She was wearing the red dress I'd bought her for our anniversary last year. The guy, Trevor apparently, had his arm around her waist and was looking at her like she was the only woman in the room. They looked comfortable together. Familiar, like this wasn't their first time playing house. I studied the photo more carefully. The background showed palm trees and neon lights. Definitely Miami, not Aruba. And definitely not a girls' trip. My phone rang. Britt again. I declined the call. Another text from her. I'm sorry, I was drunk. I shouldn't have sent that. Please don't tell her I told you. I set the phone down and walked to the kitchen counter where Jenna's mail was still piling up. Bills mostly, but also a credit card statement I hadn't seen before. I opened it. Charges from Miami. Expensive restaurants, high-end hotels, designer boutiques, all from the last 3 days, all on a card I didn't know existed. Well, I said to the empty house. Looks like someone's been planning this little getaway for a while. I made myself another cup of coffee and sat down at the kitchen table to think. Jenna had blocked me, lied to me, and was apparently living it up in Miami with her new boyfriend on a secret credit card. The question was, what was I going to do about it? I'm not a violent man, never have been, but I'm also not the kind of man who takes being made a fool of lying down. In my business, reputation is everything. Word gets around that you're a pushover, and suddenly every client thinks they can walk all over you. The same principle applied to marriage, apparently. My phone buzzed again. Another call from Britt. This time I answered. Eli, thank God. Listen, you cannot tell Jenna I told you. She'll kill me. Literally, kill me. How long? I asked. What? How long has this been going on? Britt was quiet for a moment. 2 months. Maybe 3. I don't know exactly when it started, but she's been talking about him since that conference in Boston. And you've been helping her lie to me this whole time. She said you two were having problems. She said you'd grown apart, and she needed some excitement in her life. She made it sound like you were practically separated already. I laughed, but there was no humor in it. We were having problems because she was cheating on me. Funny how that works. Eli, I'm sorry. I really am. But please, you have to promise me you won't do anything stupid. Just talk to her when she gets back. Work it out like adults. When is she getting back? Sunday night. Her flight lands at 9. And Trevor? Is he coming back with her? I don't know. I don't think so. I think this was just supposed to be a fling, a vacation thing. I hung up again. Sunday night. That gave me 4 days to figure out how I wanted to handle this. 4 days to decide whether I was going to be the understanding husband who tried to work things out, or something else entirely. I walked to the window again. Mrs. Dooley was still in her garden, but now she was openly staring at my house. When she saw me looking, she waved. I waved back, then pulled out my phone and opened the Find My app. Jenna and I had shared locations years ago for safety reasons. She'd obviously forgotten about it in all her excitement about her secret vacation. Her location showed up immediately: Miami Beach, Florida. Specifically, the Fontainebleau Hotel. I took a screenshot. Then I opened her Instagram account. Sure enough, there were photos from Aruba posted over the last 3 days. Beach shots, cocktails, group photos with her sorority sisters, all carefully curated to maintain the lie. But I recognized some of those photos. They were from previous trips, previous vacations. Britt had been telling the truth about posting old photos to cover for her. I took screenshots of those too. My phone rang. This time it was Charlie, my best friend and business partner. Hey, you want to grab lunch at the Anchor? I need to talk to someone about this disaster of a job we're working on. The Anchor was our usual spot, a dive bar that served decent burgers and didn't ask questions when you needed to drink away your problems. Actually, I said, I need to talk to someone too. Give me 20 minutes. I grabbed my keys and headed for the door. As I was leaving, I noticed Mrs. Dooley had moved closer to the fence between our properties. Everything all right, Eli? She called out. I haven't seen Jenna around lately. She's on vacation, I said. Girls' trip. Mrs. Dooley nodded knowingly. Those girls' trips can be dangerous. A woman needs to be careful about the company she keeps. I stopped walking and looked at her more carefully. What do you mean? Oh, nothing specific. Just that I've noticed some unusual activity around here lately. Strange cars, late-night phone calls in the driveway. You know how it is. I did know how it was. Mrs. Dooley saw everything that happened on our street. She was better than a security system. Strange cars? I asked. A silver BMW, expensive looking, showed up a few times over the last couple of months, usually when your truck wasn't in the driveway. The driver would wait outside until Jenna came out, then they'd drive off together. Did you see the driver? Young man, well-dressed, looked like he had money. She paused. I minded my own business, of course. Of course she did. Mrs. Dooley minding her own business was like a fish minding its own swimming. Thanks for keeping an eye on things, I said. Anytime, dear. That's what neighbors are for. I got in my truck and drove toward the Anchor, my mind racing. So Trevor hadn't just met Jenna at a conference last month. He'd been coming to my house, picking up my wife, for months. While I was at work, busting my ass to pay for the mortgage and the credit cards and the lifestyle she insisted we needed to maintain. The more I learned, the angrier I got. But it wasn't the hot, explosive kind of anger that makes you do stupid things. It was cold, calculated anger, the kind that makes you plan. By the time I pulled into the Anchor's parking lot, I'd made a decision. Jenna wanted to play games? Fine, I could play games too, but I was going to play to win. The Anchor smelled like stale beer and fried food, exactly the way it had for the past 20 years. Charlie was already there, nursing a Budweiser and looking like someone had run over his dog. You look like hell, I said, sliding into the booth across from him. Job from hell, he replied. Client keeps changing their mind about everything. First they want hardwood floors, then they want tile, now they want some imported marble that costs more than my truck. And they act like it's our fault when the timeline keeps shifting. Charlie Morrison had been my business partner for 8 years and my best friend for longer than that. He was the kind of guy who'd help you move a body without asking questions, then crack jokes while you dug the grave. Speaking of things that cost more than your truck, I said, I need to tell you something. I filled him in on everything. The blocked messages, the conversation with Britt, the photo, the credit card statement, Mrs. Dooley's intelligence report. Charlie listened without interrupting, his expression growing darker with each detail. When I finished, he was quiet for a long moment. Well, he said finally, that's fucked up. Yeah. So, what are you going to do about it? I pulled out my phone and showed him the screenshot of Jenna's location. I'm thinking we take a little road trip to Miami. Charlie raised an eyebrow. We? You said yourself this job is a disaster. What's one more day going to hurt? Eli, I'm all for supporting my friends, but driving to Miami to confront your cheating wife sounds like a good way to end up in jail. I'm not going to confront her. I'm going to gather evidence. If this goes to divorce court, I want to have everything documented. That was partially true. I did want evidence, but I also wanted to see this Trevor guy for myself. I wanted to understand what my wife thought was worth throwing away 12 years of marriage for. Evidence, Charlie repeated. Right. And what kind of evidence are we talking about? Photos, video, maybe a conversation or two, nothing illegal. Charlie finished his beer and signaled for another. You know, my cousin went through a messy divorce a few years back. Cost him half of everything plus alimony. You might want to think about whether you really want to go down this road. She's already gone down the road, I said. I'm just following the trail. Fair enough. But if we're doing this, we're doing it smart. No confrontations, no drama. We watch, we document, we leave. Agreed. And if things go sideways, we run like hell. Also agreed. Charlie grinned. All right then, road trip it is. When do we leave? How about now? 3 hours later, we were on I-95 South in Charlie's pickup truck, which was less conspicuous than my work van. We'd stopped by my house to grab some clothes and my good camera, the one I used for documenting job sites. The drive gave me time to think, and the more I thought, the angrier I got. Not just about the cheating, but about how stupid she must think I am. The fake girls' trip, the old Instagram photos, the secret credit card. She'd planned this whole elaborate deception like I was some kind of idiot who'd never figure it out. "You're grinding your teeth," Charlie said. "Am I?" "Yeah, sounds like a garbage disposal. What are you thinking about?" How long she's been lying to me. This isn't some spur-of-the-moment thing. She's been planning this for months. "Women are complicated," Charlie said. "My ex-wife used to plan our anniversary dinners 6 months in advance, but couldn't remember to tell me when she was working late. This is different. This is calculated. She blocked me so I couldn't contact her, had Britt posting fake photos to maintain her alibi, and opened a secret credit card to pay for her little romantic getaway." "The credit card thing is what gets me," Charlie said. "I mean, if you're going to cheat, at least have the decency to pay for it yourself." We drove in comfortable silence for a while, watching the Florida landscape roll by. Palm trees, strip malls, retirement communities, the American dream in all its sun-bleached glory. My phone buzzed, a text from Britt. "Eli, please call me, we need to talk." I showed the message to Charlie. "You going to call her back?" "Eventually. Right now, I'm more interested in what I'm going to find in Miami." We reached the city limits, just as the sun was setting. Miami Beach was exactly what I'd expected. Expensive cars, beautiful people, and enough neon to power a small city. The Fontainebleau Hotel stood out even among all that flash, a massive curved tower that probably cost more per night than I made in a week. "Jesus," Charlie said. "This place looks like something out of a movie." "Yeah, a movie about rich assholes who steal other people's wives." We parked across the street and I pulled out the camera. Through the telephoto lens, I could see the hotel's pool area, the restaurants, the bar. Lots of people, but no sign of Jenna or Trevor. "This might take a while," I said. "I'm not going anywhere. Besides, I've never been to Miami Beach. Might as well see how the other half lives." We waited for 2 hours before I spotted them. They came out of the hotel's main entrance, Jenna in a white sundress I'd never seen before, Trevor in khakis and a polo shirt that probably cost more than my monthly car payment. He was younger than I'd expected, maybe mid-30s, with the kind of confident swagger that comes from never having to worry about money. I started taking pictures. They walked to the valet stand, where a silver BMW was waiting. The same BMW Mrs. Dooley had seen in our driveway. "That's them," I said. Charlie leaned over to look through the camera's viewfinder. "He looks like a douche. Rich douche. The worst kind." I kept shooting as they got in the car and drove away. Then I started the truck and followed at a distance. They went to dinner at a restaurant called Joe's Stone Crab, the kind of place where you need a reservation 3 months in advance, and the wine list starts at $50 a bottle. I parked across the street and watched them through the windows. Jenna was animated, laughing, touching Trevor's hand across the table. She looked happier than I'd seen her in years. That hurt more than I'd expected it to. "She looks different," Charlie said. "Different how?" "Younger, more alive, like she's actually enjoying herself instead of just going through the motions." He was right. At home, Jenna had become increasingly distant over the past year. I'd chalked it up to work stress and the general malaise of middle age. Apparently, I'd been wrong. She wasn't bored with life, she was bored with me. They finished dinner and walked to a nightclub a few blocks away. I followed on foot, camera in hand, while Charlie stayed with the truck. The club was called Live, and it was exactly the kind of place I'd never voluntarily enter. Loud music, expensive drinks, and a crowd that looked like they'd stepped out of a fashion magazine. The bouncer at the door was the size of a refrigerator and twice as intimidating. I found a spot across the street, where I could see through the club's windows. Jenna and Trevor were on the dance floor, pressed close together, moving to music I could feel in my chest even from outside. I took more pictures. Then I saw something that made my blood boil. Trevor had his hands on my wife's ass, and she was grinding against him like they were alone in a bedroom. 12 years of marriage, and she'd never danced with me like that. Not even on our wedding night. I was so focused on what I was seeing that I almost didn't notice when they started heading for the exit. I quickly made my way back to the truck, where Charlie was waiting with the engine running. "They're coming out," I said. "How bad?" "Bad." We followed them back to the hotel, where they disappeared into the elevator together. I didn't need pictures of what happened next. "Well," Charlie said, "I think you got your evidence." I scrolled through the photos on my camera. Dozens of shots of Jenna and Trevor together, looking very much like a couple on a romantic vacation. More than enough to prove infidelity in any divorce court. But as I looked at the images, I realized something. Evidence wasn't enough. I didn't just want to prove that Jenna had cheated on me. I wanted her to face consequences for it. Real consequences. "Charlie," I said, "how do you feel about staying in Miami for another day or two?" "Why?" "Because I just realized something. Jenna thinks she's gotten away with this. She thinks she's smarter than me, that she can lie and cheat and I'll never figure it out. She's planning to come home on Sunday and pretend like nothing happened." So I think it's time she learned that actions have consequences. Charlie was quiet for a moment. "What kind of consequences are we talking about?" I smiled, but it wasn't a pleasant smile. The kind that makes sure she never forgets this vacation. The next morning, I woke up in a cheap motel room with a plan forming in my head. Charlie was still asleep in the next bed, snoring like a chainsaw. I grabbed my phone and stepped outside to make some calls. First, I called my lawyer. Well, our lawyer, the guy who'd handled our house purchase and wills. His name was David Brennan, and he specialized in real estate, but he'd know who to refer me to for divorce proceedings. "Eli, it's early. Is everything all right?" "I need a divorce attorney, Dave. A good one." There was a pause. "I'm sorry to hear that. What's the situation?" I gave him the condensed version. He listened without comment, then gave me the name of a family law attorney who had a reputation for being thorough and aggressive. "One more thing," I said. "How quickly can someone change locks on a house?" "If it's your house and your name is on the deed, immediately. But Eli, you might want to think about the optics of that. Courts don't look favorably on spouses who lock each other out. What if the other spouse is currently in another state with their lover? That's different. Document everything, and make sure you can prove she's not living in the marital home when you change the locks." Already working on that. My second call was to a locksmith in my hometown. I scheduled them to come out Saturday afternoon, the day before Jenna was supposed to return. My third call was to the credit card company for the secret card I'd found. I explained that I was the homeowner and primary account holder for all our other cards, and I was concerned about potential fraud. They were very helpful in providing me with a complete transaction history for the Miami card. It was worse than I'd thought. The card had been opened 3 months ago, and the charges weren't just from this trip. There were restaurants I'd never heard of, hotels in cities Jenna had never mentioned visiting, shopping sprees that cost more than most people's monthly salary. This wasn't a fling. This was a full-blown affair, funded by credit I'd be legally responsible for. Charlie emerged from the motel room looking like he'd been hit by a truck. "Coffee," he mumbled. "Need coffee." "Get dressed," I said. "We've got work to do." Over breakfast at a nearby diner, I outlined my plan. Charlie listened, occasionally nodding or asking clarifying questions. "So let me get this straight," he said when I finished. "You want to confront this Trevor guy directly?" "Not confront. Introduce myself, man to man." "And you think he doesn't know you exist?" "I think he knows I exist, but I don't think he sees me as a threat. Rich guys like him think they're untouchable. They think they can take whatever they want without consequences." "What if he calls the police?" "For what? Having a conversation?" I'm not going to threaten him or touch him. I'm just going to let him know that I know who he is and what he's been doing. Charlie stirred his coffee thoughtfully. You know, there's something to be said for the element of surprise. He's probably never had to deal with an angry husband before. Exactly. We spent the morning doing reconnaissance. I wanted to learn everything I could about Trevor Lane before I approached him. A few Google searches revealed that he was the founder of a tech startup that had been bought out by a larger company for several $1,000,000. He lived in a penthouse apartment in downtown Miami and drove expensive cars like they were disposable. He also had a social media presence that screamed, "Look at me." Instagram photos of exotic vacations, expensive meals, and beautiful women. Lots of beautiful women. Jenna was just the latest in a long line of conquests. That made it worse somehow. If she'd been special to him, if this had been some great love affair, I might have been able to understand it. But she was just another trophy to him, another married woman he could seduce and discard. Around noon, we positioned ourselves outside the Fontainebleau again. I'd changed clothes and was wearing a button-down shirt and khakis, trying to look like I belonged in their world. Charlie stayed with the truck while I walked into the hotel lobby like I owned the place. The lobby was all marble and gold, designed to impress people with more money than sense. I found a seat with a clear view of the elevators and settled in to wait. 20 minutes later, Trevor appeared. He was alone, dressed in a white linen shirt and designer jeans, looking like he'd stepped out of a cologne advertisement. He walked to the concierge desk and had a brief conversation, then headed for the exit. I followed him outside, where he handed a ticket to the valet. While he waited for his car, I approached. "Excuse me," I said. "Are you Trevor Lane?" He turned, and I got my first close look at the man who'd been sleeping with my wife. He was handsome in a generic, Ken doll sort of way. Perfect teeth, perfect hair, perfect tan. Everything about him screamed money and privilege. "Do I know you?" he asked. "Not yet. My name is Eli Mercer. I'm Jenna's husband." The color drained from his face. For a moment, he looked like he might run. Then he seemed to remember where he was and straightened up, trying to project confidence he clearly didn't feel. "I don't know what you're talking about," he said. I pulled out my phone and showed him one of the photos I'd taken the night before. Him and Jenna on the dance floor, his hands on her body. "Sure you do," I said. The valet brought his BMW around, but Trevor didn't move toward it. He was staring at the phone screen like it was a snake. "What do you want?" he asked. "Just to talk, man to man." "I don't think that's a good idea." "I do. See, here's the thing, Trevor. You've been fucking my wife for 3 months. You've been picking her up at my house, taking her on trips, spending money on her that I'm legally responsible for, and you've been doing it all while thinking I'm too stupid to figure it out. Look, I don't want any trouble. Too late for that. You want to avoid trouble? You should have thought about that before you started screwing married women." Trevor glanced around nervously. We were starting to attract attention from other hotel guests and staff. "Can we do this somewhere more private?" he asked. "Sure. Get in your car. I'll follow you." "I don't think—" "I'm not asking, Trevor. I'm telling you. You created this situation, and now you're going to deal with the consequences like a man, or I can make this conversation a lot more public." He looked at the phone again, at the photo that proved what he'd been doing. Then he looked at me, and I could see him trying to calculate his options. "Fine," he said. "There's a coffee shop about 10 minutes from here. We can talk there." "Good choice." I walked back to where Charlie was waiting and filled him in. "You sure about this?" he asked. "I'm sure." We followed Trevor to a small cafe in a quieter part of the city. He was already seated at a corner table when we walked in, looking like a man facing execution. I sat down across from him. Charlie took a seat at the counter where he could watch the door and intervene if things got out of hand. "So," I said, "tell me about yourself, Trevor. What do you do for a living?" "I'm in tech," he said quietly. "Right. I read about your company. Sold it for what, $8 million? Not bad for someone who's never done a day of real work in his life. Look, about Jenna, we'll get to Jenna. First, I want to understand who I'm dealing with. You're 35, single, rich, good-looking. You could have any woman you want. So why married women? What's the appeal? Trevor shifted uncomfortably in his seat. It's not like that. Then what is it like? Jenna told me she was unhappy. She said you two were having problems, that you'd grown apart. And you believed her? Why wouldn't I? Because married women who are genuinely unhappy get divorced, Trevor. They don't sneak around behind their husbands' backs and lie about girls' trips to Aruba. He didn't have an answer for that. Here's what I think happened, I continued. I think you met my wife at a conference and decided she'd be a fun challenge, the suburban housewife looking for excitement. I think you pursued her, seduced her, and convinced her that she deserved better than her boring contractor husband. I'm not finished. I think you enjoyed the thrill of taking something that belonged to someone else. I think you liked the idea that she was risking everything to be with you. It made you feel powerful, didn't it? Trevor's jaw tightened. You don't know anything about me. I know you're a coward. A real man doesn't sneak around with married women. A real man finds someone available. Jenna is available. She's choosing to be with me. On my credit card. That hit home. Trevor looked down at his hands. Did you know about the secret credit card, Trevor? Did you know that every expensive dinner, every hotel room, every gift you bought her was being charged to an account that I'm legally responsible for? She said she had her own money. She lied, just like she lied about being in Aruba, just like she's been lying to both of us about what this relationship really is. I leaned forward. See, here's what you don't understand about my wife. Jenna is a social climber. She's always been attracted to money and status. When she married me, I was a young contractor with big dreams and a growing business. She thought I was going to make her rich. And did you? I did well enough. We have a nice house, nice cars, take decent vacations. But I'm never going to be rich like you, Trevor. I'm never going to be able to afford the lifestyle she really wants. So she found someone who could. Exactly. And when she gets bored with you, or when you get tired of her, she'll move on to the next guy, because that's who she is. Trevor was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. What do you want from me? I want you to understand that actions have consequences. I want you to know that this little fantasy you've been living is about to come to an end. Are you threatening me? I'm informing you. Jenna is flying home tomorrow night. When she gets there, she's going to find that her life has changed significantly. The locks will be changed, the credit cards will be canceled, and divorce papers will be waiting for her. You can't just kick her out of her own house. Actually, I can. It's my house. My name is on the deed, I pay the mortgage, and she's currently in violation of our marriage contract by committing adultery in another state. Trevor looked sick. What about me? What about you? Are you going to, I don't know, sue me or something? I laughed. Sue you for what? Being an asshole isn't illegal, Trevor. But I am going to make sure that everyone in Jenna's life knows exactly what kind of man she threw away her marriage for. I stood up to leave, then turned back. One more thing. If I ever see you in my town, if you ever contact my wife again after this weekend, if you so much as drive down my street, I will make your life very unpleasant. I know people in construction, Trevor. People who work with heavy machinery and aren't afraid to use it. Do we understand each other? Trevor nodded quickly. Good. Enjoy the rest of your vacation. I walked out of the cafe feeling better than I had in days. Charlie was waiting by the truck, grinning. How'd it go? Better than expected. He's not as tough as he thinks he is. Most rich guys aren't. They're used to buying their way out of problems. Well, this is one problem money can't solve. We drove back to the motel to pack up. Tomorrow was Saturday, and I had a lot of work to do before Jenna came home. Saturday morning, Charlie and I were back in my hometown by 10 a.m. I dropped him off at his place and headed home to start phase 2 of my plan. The locksmith arrived right on schedule at 2 p.m. By 3, every lock on the house had been changed. I gave him a generous tip and asked him to keep the work confidential. He assured me that discretion was part of the service. Next, I called the credit card companies and canceled every card that had Jenna's name on it. I explained that we were getting divorced and I needed to protect myself from additional unauthorized charges. They were surprisingly understanding and helpful. Then I went through the house systematically, packing up Jenna's belongings. Not everything. I wasn't trying to be vindictive. But her clothes, personal items, jewelry, and anything else that was clearly hers went into boxes and suitcases. I loaded everything into my truck and drove to her sister's house across town. Lisa answered the door looking confused. "Eli, what are you doing here? And why do you have all those boxes?" "Jenna and I are getting divorced," I said simply. "She's going to need a place to stay when she gets back from her trip." Lisa's face went through several expressions in rapid succession: confusion, shock, concern, and finally understanding. "Oh God," she said. "You found out." "You knew?" I suspected. She's been different lately, happier, but also more secretive, and she's been spending money like crazy. Lisa stepped aside to let me bring the boxes in. "What happened?" I gave her the abbreviated version while I stacked boxes in her living room. Lisa listened without interrupting, her expression growing more troubled with each detail. "I can't believe she did this to you," she said when I finished. 12 years of marriage, and she throws it away for some rich guy she barely knows. Apparently, she's been getting to know him pretty well over the past 3 months. Still, this isn't like her. I mean, Jenna's always been ambitious, but she's not cruel. Maybe you don't know her as well as you think you do. Lisa was quiet for a moment. "What are you going to do when she gets home?" "Nothing. I'm going to let her figure out that her old life doesn't exist anymore, and then I'm going to let her decide what she wants to do about it." "Eli, she's still my sister. I love her, even if she's made some terrible choices. Can't you two work this out somehow?" "She made her choice, Lisa. She chose Trevor and his money over me and our marriage. Now she gets to live with the consequences." I finished unloading the boxes and headed for the door. "When she calls you, and she will call you, tell her that if she wants to talk to me, she can do it through my lawyer." "What lawyer?" I handed her David Brennan's business card. "He'll put her in touch with someone who specializes in divorce cases." I left Lisa standing in her doorway, looking like someone had just told her that gravity had been canceled. My next stop was the Anchor, where I knew I'd find most of the town's gossip network on a Saturday evening. Mrs. Dooley was there, holding court at her usual table with 3 other neighborhood women. They looked up expectantly when I walked in. "Eli," Mrs. Dooley called out, "come join us. We were just talking about you." I bought a beer and sat down at their table. All good things, I hope. We were wondering how Jenna's trip was going. Such a shame that she couldn't take you along. "Actually," I said, "Jenna's trip has been very educational. For both of us." Mrs. Dooley's eyes lit up. She could smell gossip from a mile away. "Oh, how so?" "Well, it turns out she wasn't in Aruba with her girlfriends after all. She was in Miami with her boyfriend." The table went dead silent. Then all 4 women started talking at once. "Boyfriend? Are you sure?" I knew something was going on. "That silver BMW." I let them chatter for a moment, then held up my hand for silence. "Ladies, I'm going to tell you something in confidence, and I trust that it won't leave this table." I paused for effect. "At least not until tomorrow." They all leaned in closer. "Jenna has been having an affair for the past 3 months with a man named Trevor Lane. He's a wealthy tech entrepreneur from Miami. They've been meeting regularly. He's been picking her up at our house, and this week they went on a romantic vacation together while she told me she was on a girls' trip to Aruba." Mrs. Dooley gasped theatrically. "I knew it. I told you about that BMW, didn't I? I said something wasn't right about that situation. You did indeed. And you were absolutely correct. What are you going to do? Asked Margaret from 2 houses down. I've already done it. Changed the locks, canceled the credit cards, packed her belongings, and filed for divorce. When she comes home tomorrow night, she'll find that her old life no longer exists. Good for you, said Helen from across the street. A woman who cheats on her husband deserves whatever she gets. Now, I'm not telling you this to be vindictive, I continued. I'm telling you because Jenna is going to come home tomorrow and probably try to spin this situation to make me look like the bad guy. I want you to know the truth before she starts spreading lies. Don't worry about that, Mrs. Dooley said firmly. We know what kind of man you are, Eli, and we know what we've seen with our own eyes. I finished my beer and stood up to leave. I appreciate your support, ladies. It means a lot. As I walked away, I could hear them already starting to plan their phone calls. By tomorrow morning, everyone in town would know that Jenna Mercer had been caught cheating on her husband. Sunday evening, I was sitting in my living room watching TV and waiting. Jenna's flight was supposed to land at 9 p.m., which meant she'd probably be home by 10:30, assuming she took a cab from the airport. At 10:45, I heard a car pull into the driveway. Then footsteps on the front porch, then the sound of a key being inserted into the lock. When it didn't work, she tried again. And again. Then the doorbell rang. I muted the TV and walked to the front door. Through the peephole, I could see Jenna standing on the porch with her suitcase, looking confused and frustrated. Eli, she called out. The key isn't working. Are you in there? I didn't answer. Eli, this isn't funny. Open the door. I walked back to the living room and turned the TV volume back up. 5 minutes later, my phone started ringing. Jenna's number. I declined the call. She called again, and again. Then she started texting. Why won't you answer the door? What's wrong with the locks? Call me back. I didn't respond. An hour later, the calls and texts stopped. I looked out the window and saw that her cab was gone. She'd probably gone to her sister's house. 20 minutes after that, my phone rang. Lisa's number. Eli, what the hell is going on? Jenna just showed up at my house crying, saying you changed the locks and won't answer her calls. Did she also mention that she spent the last week in Miami with her boyfriend? There was a pause. She says it's not what you think. It's exactly what I think. She's been cheating on me for 3 months, Lisa. I have photos, credit card records, and witness statements. There's no ambiguity here. She wants to talk to you. She says she can explain everything. Then she can explain it to my lawyer. I gave you his card yesterday. Eli, please. She's my sister. She's sitting in my kitchen sobbing. Whatever she did, don't you think she deserves a chance to make it right? She had a chance to make it right 3 months ago when she first met Trevor. She chose to lie and cheat instead. Now she gets to live with the consequences. You're being cruel. I'm being honest. There's a difference. I hung up and turned my phone off. The next morning, I was awakened by someone pounding on my front door. I looked out the window and saw Jenna standing on the porch, looking like she hadn't slept all night. Eli, she shouted. I know you're in there. We need to talk. I got dressed and made coffee, ignoring the continued pounding and shouting. This is ridiculous, she yelled. I'm your wife. You can't just lock me out of my own house. Actually, I could. And I had. The pounding stopped, and I heard her talking to someone. Through the window, I could see her on her phone, pacing back and forth on the porch. 20 minutes later, a police car pulled up. 2 officers got out and approached the house. One of them knocked on the door while the other talked to Jenna. I opened the door. Mr. Mercer, I'm Officer Rodriguez. We got a call about a domestic dispute. No dispute, officer. My wife and I are getting divorced, and she's no longer welcome in this house. She says you changed the locks and won't let her get her belongings. Her belongings are at her sister's house. I moved them there yesterday. Officer Rodriguez looked confused. Sir, if this is the marital home, you can't just lock your wife out. Actually, I can. The house is in my name only, I pay the mortgage, and she's currently in violation of our marriage contract due to adultery committed in another state. I handed him copies of the documentation I'd prepared. The deed showing my sole ownership, the credit card statement showing her unauthorized charges in Miami, and several of the photos I'd taken of her with Trevor. Officer Rodriguez looked through the papers, then showed them to his partner. They had a brief conversation, then came back to me. Mr. Mercer, this appears to be a civil matter. We can't force you to let your wife into a house that's legally yours, especially given the evidence of infidelity. What about my things? Jenna demanded. I have personal items in there. As I told the officer, your belongings are at your sister's house. If there's something specific you need, you can make a request through your attorney. I don't have an attorney. Then you should probably get one. The officers left, and Jenna stood on my porch for another 10 minutes, alternating between pleading and threats. Finally, she gave up and left. I watched her walk down the street toward her sister's house, dragging her suitcase behind her. She looked small and defeated, nothing like the confident woman who'd left for her girls' trip a week ago. For a moment, I almost felt sorry for her. Then I remembered the photo of her grinding against Trevor on the dance floor, and the feeling passed. My phone rang. Charlie. How'd it go? He asked. Better than expected. She tried to get the cops to force me to let her in, but they said it was a civil matter. So what's next? Now we wait. She'll hire a lawyer, I'll hire a lawyer, and we'll let them sort out the details. And Trevor? What about him? You think he'll try to contact her? I thought about the conversation I'd had with Trevor in Miami, the fear in his eyes when I'd implied that I knew people who weren't afraid to use heavy machinery. No, I said. I don't think we'll be hearing from Trevor again. I was right. Over the next few days, as word of Jenna's affair spread through town, I heard through the gossip network that she'd been trying desperately to reach Trevor. But he wasn't answering her calls or texts. Apparently, being confronted by an angry husband had reminded him that there were easier ways to find female companionship. Jenna had lost her husband, her home, her financial security, and her lover all in the span of a week. She was staying at her sister's house, unemployed and facing a divorce that would leave her with very little. Meanwhile, I was sleeping better than I had in months. 2 weeks after Jenna's return from Miami, I was sitting in the office of Patricia Hendricks, the divorce attorney David Brennan had recommended. She was a sharp woman in her 50s who had a reputation for being thorough and aggressive, exactly what I needed. This is quite a case file you've put together, she said, flipping through the photos, credit card statements, and documentation I'd provided. Your wife's attorney is going to have a very difficult time arguing for anything beyond basic support. What kind of timeline are we looking at? In Massachusetts, you need to wait 6 months from the time of filing before the divorce can be finalized. But given the evidence of adultery and financial misconduct, I don't anticipate any significant delays. And the house? The house is yours. Your name is on the deed, you've been making the mortgage payments, and she committed adultery. The court isn't going to award her half of an asset she helped devalue through her own actions. What about alimony? Patricia smiled grimly. That's where things get interesting. Normally, a spouse who's been married for 12 years and doesn't work might be entitled to temporary support. But the secret credit card changes everything. She pulled out a calculator and started running numbers. Based on the statements you provided, your wife charged approximately $37,000 to that secret card over the past 3 months. The court is going to view that as dissipation of marital assets. Any alimony she might have been entitled to will be offset by the money she essentially stole from the marriage. So she gets nothing? She gets whatever personal property she brought into the marriage, half of your joint savings account, and half the value of any retirement accounts accumulated during the marriage. But the house, your business, and your future earnings are protected. I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. What's her attorney saying? They're trying to argue that the credit card was for legitimate marital expenses, and that the adultery was the result of an already failed marriage. It's a weak position, but they have to try something. Have you heard from Jenna directly? No, but her attorney has indicated that she might be interested in mediation rather than going to trial. I'm not interested in mediation. I want this handled in court, with everything on the public record. Patricia raised an eyebrow. That's unusual. Most people prefer to keep their private business out of the public eye. Most people don't have wives who lie to the entire town about where they're going on vacation. I want everyone to know exactly what kind of person she is. All right, but you should know that a public trial will be expensive and time-consuming. I don't care about the expense, and I've got plenty of time. That evening, I stopped by the Anchor for dinner and found the place buzzing with conversation. Mrs. Dooley waved me over to her table where she was holding court with her usual audience. Eli, perfect timing. We were just talking about the Henderson divorce from last year. Remember how messy that got? I sat down with my beer. I remember. Well, it's got nothing on what's happening with you and Jenna. The whole town is talking about it. What are they saying? Margaret leaned in conspiratorially. That she's been trying to get a job, but nobody wants to hire her. Apparently word has gotten around about why you two are divorcing. That's unfortunate, I said, not meaning it. Helen saw her at the grocery store yesterday, Mrs. Dooley continued. She looked terrible, like she hadn't slept in days. Guilty conscience will do that to you. Her sister Lisa is telling people that you're being unreasonable, that you should give Jenna a chance to explain herself. I took a long drink of my beer. What's to explain? She lied about where she was going, spent 3 months cheating on me with a rich guy, and used a secret credit card to finance her affair. Those are facts, not opinions. That's what I told Lisa, Mrs. Dooley said firmly. I said, your sister made her bed, now she has to lie in it, alone. The other women at the table laughed. Speaking of Lisa, Margaret said, I heard she's been asking around town, trying to find out if anyone would be willing to testify as character witnesses for Jenna. Any takers? Not many. Most people remember how she used to act like she was better than everyone else, always talking about how she deserved nice things, how she was meant for bigger things than this town. Well, now she's got her chance to find out what's out there beyond this little town. I finished my beer and was getting ready to leave when Charlie walked in. He looked like he had news. Eli, you got a minute? Sure. What's up? I just heard something interesting. You remember my cousin Jake, the one who works for that tech company in Boston? Yeah. Well, he was at some industry event last week, and guess whose name came up in conversation? Trevor's? Bingo. Apparently word has gotten around about his little affair with a married woman. The tech world is smaller than you'd think, and people talk. What kind of talk? The kind that makes investors nervous. Jake said there were rumors that Trevor's been involved in multiple affairs with married women, and that he uses his money and status to manipulate them into leaving their husbands. Interesting. Gets better. Jake heard that Trevor's trying to put together funding for a new venture, but potential investors are concerned about his personal reputation. Apparently being known as a home wrecker isn't good for business. I smiled. Couldn't happen to a nicer guy. There's more. Jake also heard that Trevor's been trying to keep a low profile lately. Word is, he's been getting threatening phone calls and emails from angry husbands. I wouldn't know anything about that. Of course not. But it sounds like your little conversation with him in Miami made an impression. We talked for a few more minutes, then Charlie left to go home to his family. I sat at the bar, nursing another beer and thinking about how quickly things could change. 3 weeks ago, Jenna had been living in our house, spending money on her secret credit card and planning her romantic getaway with Trevor. She'd probably thought she was being clever, that she was finally getting the exciting life she deserved. Now she was unemployed, homeless, and facing a divorce that would leave her with almost nothing. Her lover had abandoned her the moment things got complicated, and the entire town knew her as a cheater and a liar. Meanwhile, Trevor's reputation in his own industry was suffering, and he was apparently dealing with harassment from other men he'd wronged. Actions had consequences. It had just taken a while for the bill to come due. My phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "This is Jenna. Please call me. We need to talk." I deleted the message without responding. 5 minutes later, another text. "I know you're getting these messages. I just want to explain what happened." I deleted that one too. Then my phone rang. The same unknown number. I declined the call. It rang again and again. Finally, I answered. "What?" "Eli, thank God. I've been trying to reach you for days." "I know. I've been ignoring you for days. Please, just give me 5 minutes to explain." "Explain what? That you've been cheating on me for 3 months? That you lied about going to Aruba? That you opened a secret credit card to finance your affair?" "I already know all of that, Jenna. I have photos." There was silence on the other end of the line. "Trevor told me you confronted him in Miami," she said finally. "Did he? What else did he tell you?" "That you threatened him." "I informed him that actions have consequences. Apparently he took that as a threat. He won't return my calls." "Smart man." "Eli, please. I made a mistake, a terrible mistake. But we can work through this. We can go to counseling, we can—" "No, we can't. You didn't make a mistake, Jenna. You made a series of deliberate choices over the course of 3 months. You chose to lie to me, you chose to cheat on me, and you chose to spend money we didn't have on your affair. Those weren't mistakes. They were decisions. I was unhappy. So was I. The difference is, I didn't run off with someone else's wife. You don't understand. I understand perfectly. You thought you could have it all. The security of being married to me and the excitement of being with Trevor. You thought you were smarter than everyone else, that you could keep your affair secret indefinitely. It wasn't supposed to happen like this." "How was it supposed to happen? Were you planning to divorce me eventually? Or were you just going to keep lying and cheating until I died?" She started crying. "I don't know. I wasn't thinking clearly." "You were thinking clearly enough to open a secret credit card and plan elaborate lies about girls' trips. What do you want me to say? That I'm sorry? I am sorry. I'm sorrier than you can possibly imagine." "I want you to say nothing. I want you to hang up this phone, call your attorney, and prepare for the divorce proceedings, because that's all we have left to discuss." "Eli," I hung up. She called back immediately. I declined the call and turned off my phone. The next morning, I woke up to find my truck's windshield had been smashed. There was a note under the wiper. "This is what you get for ruining my life." I called the police and filed a report, making sure to mention that my estranged wife had been trying to contact me and had threatened me the night before. I also called my insurance company and arranged to have the windshield replaced. Then I called Patricia Hendricks. "She's escalating," I told her. "First the phone calls, now vandalism. I want a restraining order." "I can file for that this afternoon. Do you have evidence that she was the one who damaged your truck?" She left a note. "Perfect. Bring it to my office along with the police report." By the end of the week, Jenna had been served with a restraining order prohibiting her from contacting me or coming within 500 feet of my house or business. She was also facing criminal charges for vandalism. Her attorney called Patricia to discuss a plea bargain, but I wasn't interested in making deals. I wanted Jenna to face the full consequences of her actions, both civil and criminal. The message was simple. You don't get to lie, cheat, steal, and then throw a tantrum when you get caught. Not without paying a price. 6 months after filing for divorce, I found myself sitting in a courtroom, watching my wife of 12 years try to convince a judge that she deserved half of everything I'd worked for. Jenna looked different. Thinner, older, worn down by months of stress and uncertainty. She was wearing a conservative blue dress that I'd never seen before, probably borrowed from her sister. Her lawyer, a young guy who looked like he'd graduated from law school the week before, was doing his best with a hopeless case. "Your Honor," he was saying, "while my client acknowledges that mistakes were made during the marriage, she contributed significantly to the household and deserves consideration for her years of partnership with Mr. Mercer." Patricia Hendricks stood up for my side. "Your Honor, the evidence clearly shows that Mrs. Mercer engaged in a systematic campaign of deception and financial fraud that undermined the marriage and dissipated marital assets." She laid out the case methodically. The secret credit card with $37,000 in charges, the documented affair lasting 3 months, the elaborate lies about the Miami trip, and the vandalism of my truck after she was confronted with the evidence. "This wasn't a momentary lapse in judgment," Patricia continued. "This was a calculated betrayal of the marriage contract that lasted months and cost Mr. Mercer both emotionally and financially." The judge, a stern woman in her 60s, looked through the evidence with obvious distaste. When she came to the photos of Jenna and Trevor in Miami, she frowned. "Mrs. Mercer," she said, "do you dispute the authenticity of these photographs?" Jenna's lawyer whispered something to her, then stood up. "Your Honor, my client acknowledges that she engaged in an extramarital relationship, but she maintains that this was the result of an already failing marriage." "And the secret credit card?" My client was confused about the family finances. She didn't realize that opening the card would be problematic. The judge looked skeptical. She didn't realize that opening a secret credit card and charging $37,000 without her husband's knowledge would be problematic. She was in an emotionally vulnerable state. "Mr. Peterson," the judge interrupted, "your client is a grown woman who worked in marketing for 10 years. She understood exactly what she was doing." The judge spent the next hour going through the evidence, asking pointed questions about the timeline of the affair, the financial deception, and the attempted vandalism. Jenna's answers were hesitant and unconvincing. When it was over, the judge's ruling was swift and decisive. "The court finds that Mrs. Mercer engaged in adultery and financial misconduct that directly harmed the marriage. Mr. Mercer will retain sole ownership of the marital home and his business assets. Mrs. Mercer will receive half of the joint savings account, minus her share of the credit card debt she incurred during her affair." She paused to do some quick math. After accounting for the unauthorized charges, Mrs. Mercer's share of the marital assets comes to approximately $4,000. Jenna's face went white. Her lawyer looked like he wanted to disappear. "Additionally," the judge continued, "given Mrs. Mercer's misconduct and her current ability to work, no alimony will be awarded." The gavel came down with a sharp crack. Outside the courthouse, Jenna tried to approach me, but Patricia stepped between us. "The restraining order is still in effect," she reminded Jenna's lawyer. "Your client needs to stay away from Mr. Mercer." I walked to my truck without looking back. That evening, I was at the Anchor celebrating with Charlie and a few other friends when Mrs. Dooley hurried in, practically vibrating with excitement. "Eli, you'll never guess what I just saw." "What's that, Mrs. Dooley?" "Jenna, loading boxes into a U-Haul truck outside her sister's house. Lisa was crying and there was a lot of shouting." "She's leaving town?" "That's what it looked like. The truck had Florida plates." I raised my beer. "Well then, here's to new beginnings." The next morning, Charlie called with more news. "You remember my cousin Jake, the one in the tech industry?" "Yeah. He heard something interesting about your friend Trevor." "He's not my friend." "Right. Well, anyway, Trevor's new business venture fell through. Couldn't get funding, and apparently he's been having some legal troubles of his own." "What kind of legal troubles?" "Seems like another husband he messed with didn't take it as well as you did. Guy named Patterson from Atlanta. His wife left him for Trevor last year, and Patterson's been making Trevor's life very difficult ever since." "How difficult?" "The kind of difficult that involves private investigators, harassment lawsuits, and frozen bank accounts. Trevor's been spending more on lawyers than he's been making." Couldn't happen to a nicer guy? Gets better. Jake heard that Trevor's been trying to lay low, maybe leave the country for a while. But it's hard to run when you're tied up in multiple lawsuits. I smiled. Actions have consequences. That they do. A week later, I got a call from David Brennan, my original lawyer. Eli, I thought you'd want to know. I just heard from a colleague in Florida. Your ex-wife tried to hire him for a bankruptcy filing. Bankruptcy? Apparently, she's been having trouble finding work, and she's got significant credit card debt from her time in Miami, plus legal bills from the divorce and the criminal case. What criminal case? The vandalism charge for your truck. She pled guilty and got probation, but she still had to pay court costs and restitution. So she's broke. Completely. My colleague said she was asking about debt forgiveness programs and whether she could get her alimony ruling reversed. Can she? Not a chance. The judge's ruling was based on clear evidence of misconduct. That's not going to change. I hung up and sat in my kitchen. Looking out at the yard Jenna used to complain wasn't landscaped well enough. The house was quiet, but it was a good quiet now, peaceful instead of tense. My phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. I hope you're happy. You destroyed my life. I deleted it without responding. Another text. I lost everything because of you. I deleted that one too. Then, Trevor won't even talk to me. I have nothing left. I blocked the number. 10 minutes later, my phone rang. A different unknown number. What? I answered. It's me. Jenna's voice was barely above a whisper. I told you not to contact me. I'm leaving Florida. I can't make it here. I can't make it anywhere. That's not my problem. Eli, please. I know I hurt you, but this is too much. I'm living in my car. I can't get a job because everyone knows what happened. I can't even afford food. You should have thought about that before you decided to cheat on me. I made a mistake. You made a choice, multiple choices. Now you get to live with the consequences. I'm begging you. Beg someone else. Maybe Trevor will help you out. Trevor won't return my calls. His lawyers sent me a cease and desist letter. Smart lawyers, I said. Please, Eli. I don't know what else to do. I told her to get any job, start over, move away if she had to, but never call me for sympathy. She'd burn that bridge when she decided I wasn't enough. I hung up and blocked the number. That night, alone on my porch under the stars, I realized I wasn't lonely. I was free. Charlie called, asked how I was. I said the truth, better than I'd been in years. Jenna chose lies. I chose consequences. Morning came. One last text. You win. Deleted. Coffee. New life. Dignity.